Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Bern, last week on our show, we were discussing some alternative ways for people to make an income in a free enterprise system other than being employees in a traditional job. And we received a lot of comments from our viewers, and there was a lot of interesting discussion that took place. Especially in one topic, we were discussing network marketing, multi-level companies, a way of earning an income by sharing ideas with your friends, advertising word of mouth, so to speak. And I got a couple of questions this week that I wanted to just ask you as we wrap this topic up. For example, someone said that in order to make money in a multi-level marketing company, you have to be in at the beginning.
Well, certainly it's nice to be a pioneer, to start out. Any new multi-level company normally would be considered an adventure. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of growing pains to go through. Being on the ground floor is delightful, but you've got to understand it's going to be dusty and dirty. There's going to be a lot of transitions in the first year or two as they adjust to the pace of the growth and this type of thing. But the fact of the matter remains that there are multi-level companies, networking companies out here that are 20, 30, and 40, and 50 years old. And the fact of the matter is that the person that gets into today has the same opportunity, the same chance as the person who started a half a century ago. And in time may even earn more money than has ever been earned. In other words, essentially, and besides they got a better chance because they got a track to run on. I mean, there's been a lot of experience in some of these companies, and they've learned what not to do and what to do. And if a person is open to copying, to integrating the information and accepting what works, okay, then they can do quite well very quickly. We do know this, that I know that I had a conversation earlier this evening, and some fellow was saying, well, I don't see how that everybody can keep making money if they're only paying out like 50%. Okay?
Right.
Well, they don't. In other words, there is a cutoff point somewhere. Like if you, say for example, you had a generational situation where you had 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 6 times, for a total of 60%. Once this individual had reached through those generations, then he would drop off anything that happened after that. I mean, it stands to reason. You just can't create 10% over a certain percentage.
You run out of money.
But the person that gets in down here has exactly the same opportunity that the person had when he first started. And what it does, it takes time to involve yourself and to go into some of these environments and to embrace ideas rather than refute them. There's a tendency for a fear-filled mind. So any mind that's in chaos or confusion tends to go into conflict. Now you start talking network marketing and it gets chaotic because you're talking about, I mean, sometimes thousands of people becoming involved. And when you start trying to attribute credit to all those people and to pay someone for having started that whole venture, it gets complicated. And I know sometimes it takes me, I'm a slow learner, but it takes me 9, 10, 12 hours sometimes of reading and studying and drawing scenarios. And all of a sudden it goes, oh, I see what they're doing. And it's always miraculous. But I think a person has to go to these things and embrace them, remembering always one thing, that if anybody can do something, anybody, certainly if a lot of people are doing something, then it can be done by that individual. Now, they may not be prepared to do it, and they may not have the abilities that attend the task, but they have the capacity for it. And if they will engage themselves and listen to the teaching and respond to the coaching, or submit to the coaching and respond to it, eventually they will grasp the tools. And after that they can do quite well.
Well, I certainly can understand then that there may be value in being with a company that's established because you have the benefit of the experience and the track record of the people who've already gone through the learning curve that is associated with any new business. But isn't the opportunity diminished because you have the business been exposed? Is everyone who is interested in it has already had the opportunity presented to them?
Gina, there's more people graduating from high school in this city than every multi-level can contact. You know what I mean? It's just, there's so many people and so many possibilities that just doesn't occur. We mentioned here a couple of weeks ago that I didn't want to get into naming names, But most people are aware of one or two or three networking, multi-level companies that have been around here for a long, long time. And I mean, they're still flourishing. And there are people who will start tomorrow who will build empires. And it just doesn't dry out. I know there's a feeling that if it keeps on going, everybody's going to be involved. But I tell you, when you get into the numbers, when you're talking millions and hundreds of millions of people in this country, and now the world, see, networking is beginning to cross the borders into the, what are they called over in Asia? Anyway,
Pacific Rim?
Yeah, the Pacific Rim, and going into Europe. I mean, Russia's becoming available. I mean, my goodness, the opportunities are incredible. And if a person gets involved in something like that and endures, that's the key, to get in it, learn it, integrate it, endure, and the chances are it'll work for them.
Well, obviously, not everyone's going to participate in that kind of money-making venture.
Isn't that a shame?
But as a way to make a living. But I would imagine there will be anyone who would look at a multi-level marketing company as a potential way to earn a living would have friends, family, neighbors, whoever, who might be interested in purchasing the product or service that they provide, although they might not actively build a business themselves.
I think a lot of times people will get into network marketing to buy a product wholesale, which is really what it's all about. And leaders or people who are trying to build a business will prevail upon them to do more than they wanted to do before they were prepared to do it, and they'll actually stop buying the product. That's a shame. I mean, the idea is to find out what a person wants to do and to accommodate them, because that's one thing about networking. I mean, they embrace everybody. The hobbyist, you know, the one who just wants to do it consequentially, the vocationist or the professional. There's room for all of those people. And there are levels, too. There are those who come in just to buy the product. There are those who come in to advocate. You know, they'll buy and they tell other people about it. And that's all they really intend to do at first, if ever. And then there are those who'd like to build an extra income, and they treat it somewhat like a job. And then there are the leaders, the promoters, if you would, who make a profession out of it.
Right.
And thank goodness for them, frankly, because they're the ones that keep these things alive. Participants don't make it work. Participants can benefit, but they don't make the big picture work. It's going to take leadership and coaching and this type of thing. You know, I just mentioned the word coaching, if I can kind of swing off on this tangent. When a person, if a person, looks at one of these companies,
Yes.
there is a understandable philosophy out here that you should always kind of sponsor under the person who introduced you. And, you know, I respect that and I honor it. However, from an individual standpoint, they ought to put some investigation into where the coaching is going to come from. How far upline do they have to go to find someone who really knows what to do, who has the time and the propensity to spend with them? Because without coaching, like I say, most people probably aren't going to get it to work.
Right.
Because they don't have the tools and it's different and what have you. Coaching is a funny thing. See, a lot of training going on out here in the professional and sales industries, but very little coaching. And coaching is more of a one-on-one, hands-on, watch what people are doing and correcting, guiding, shifting, changing. For example, one of the illustrations that I use about this, I don't know how much you know about National Football League football.
Yes.
Quite a bit, probably.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine a scenario where we just passed a resolution and we're going to let Gina Fit, or actually one of our viewers or listeners, to have a franchise? We're going to give you a franchise, and we're going to make a special arrangement where you can reach out into all the other franchises and select 2 of every position from any team you choose.
Okay.
Okay, now you can pick any 2 quarterbacks, any 2 tailbacks, any 2 centers, any 2 guards, you know what I mean? You'd have some team.
Oh,
wouldn't you?
absolutely.
Oh,
You're an all-star team.
Yeah, there's one thing though, no coaches. Can't have any coaches, and none of the team members can function as a coach. No one can function as a coach. How well is that team going to do?
Well, you'd have no direction. No focus.
I
no
bet you they
purpose.
would have trouble winning 1 or 2 games a season.
Yeah.
The coach may not be on the playing field. The coach may never have even played the game. I mean, really been on the field. And yet someone has to know the rules and how to use the tools effectively that convey that information to you. And all I'm saying is that if you're going to get into multi-level marketing or networking, to look around and to kind of go up into the management structure, or the leadership structure actually, and find people who have the wherewithal, who are doing the business, who have the languaging, and connect with them. I mean, cuddle up, stay close, and endure, and you'll probably be okay.
It only makes sense that if you want to be successful, that you're going to choose to associate with successful people. And that, what do they say, if you want to be successful, you find someone who's doing what you'd like to do, and then do what they do.
Copy, copy, copy.
Yeah,
You know,
I
you
think
bet.
that's an important thing to consider.
I did have a fella call me today, in fact it was early this morning, and he said, I really liked your show.
Oh,
In
that's
fact, we were
nice.
on this morning, evidently. He said, I really liked your show, he said, but you know, I've been in several of these, and he says, it never worked for me. And then he said, it really doesn't seem fair to get your friends to spend a couple $100s to get started if you know they're not going to make it. Or even if only 2 out of 10 make it, I mean, that's not fair. And I said, well, listen to next week and we'll discuss that. So if I may, I like
Okay,
to kind
great.
of wind this into the thing. Can't make that judgment. Gina, since 1955, I have recruited literally, I mean, tens of thousands of people into the free enterprise system, tens of thousands, and never made a mistake. Never made a mistake recruiting someone in. Because they might have made a mistake by not listening, by not practicing, by not attempting, by not enduring. And even those who ran out of time and money in their effort and had to move on with their life and escape back into the job system and what have you, every one of those people, I believe, went away better than whence they came. In other words, the investment of the time and the money and the energy was not in the company. The company doesn't need their money. The investment is in themselves.
I see.
That experience, that exposure, you know, I mean, you can't get into these environments where you're running with people who are on purpose, with people who are inspired, with people who know how to communicate, all right, without benefiting. I mean, someone once said that each of us is a common denominator of the 5 people that we spend our time with. And I'll tell you, you can get into some of these organizations, and you're going to run into some dynamic people, and people who genuinely care that you do well. As a matter of fact, I know that there's been lots of people in my life that I had more awareness, more confidence, more desire for their future than they did. There's no question. Now, multi-level doesn't work, okay? You have to work it to a certain point, and then it can work for you. Remember, I think we said the other night that there's a point of dynamic return, accelerated return. It might occur in 2 or 3 or 4 generations of sponsoring and coaching and teaching and what have you. But when you find leaders out there who are willing to copy and do what you've just done, providing you've done what the ones did that preceded you, you know, that kind of rolls from one generation to the next. I mean, it starts working for you. Back in 1975, had a association with a man who went from $12,000 a month income to $27,000 a month income and didn't do anything.
Really?
Yeah, he wasn't running meetings, he wasn't stocking the merchandise. In fact, he was doing everything he could to shut it down, it seemed like to me. And yet his income kept going up because there were people under him generationally who couldn't care less about what he did or didn't do. They were building their business, their dream, their future, and so he was a beneficiary of that. And properly, because without him, they probably wouldn't have been in the business.
He had prepared he had done the work previously, prepared the way.
He'd set the stage.
I think it is important at this point, though, to caution anyone who's investigating any company or business to do very careful and thorough research about the company, its stability, how long it's been around, also the people that they are getting in business with, and isn't there often a money-back guarantee?
Well, that's another thing this fellow mentioned about spending that money and what have you. Most of the companies that I'm familiar with and have worked with in the past, and you understand that I've been invited to do a lot of their training, have money-back guarantees within 60, 90 days, sometimes even a whole year, that if it doesn't work out, that any usable product can be returned for anywhere from 80 to 100% return on the money. And so they're trying to do it right. And a lot of people don't take advantage of that and almost would prefer to shame the dream. I've seen that happen where if something doesn't work out, it can't be my fault, therefore it must be your fault. And so evidence for that is I've got a whole bunch of stuff in my closet.
Yes.
Where indeed they probably could have packaged it up and sent it back and got a check or some kind of consideration and had their hands clean of it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that sounds to me like that is along the lines of some of the things we've just discussed in previous shows.
Yes.
About being responsible for yourself. That it's up to you each day to make the choices about the power that you have to be productive in your life and to be happy and to make things happen for you. I think that works in every facet of our life. And Bern, I'd like to, if I could, ask you a little bit about maybe the reasons that people make excuses when they don't succeed, whether it's in business or in their social lives or maybe in their pleasurable pursuits. There seems to be a real propensity for people to make excuses when they fail rather than accept responsibility and just say, it was something I decided wasn't worth the effort.
Yeah. The excuses are scripted out there in the world, and so they pick up on them because they don't know why they didn't make it. They don't know why they didn't do it. Because most of us are severely influenced by the subconscious mind. In the past, we've talked about the trichotomous mind and the fact that there's a piece of that mind that wants everything to stay just the way it is.
Just the way it is.
As a matter of fact, it's even more comfortable as things slipping away, so long as it's still alive, than it might be for you to go making things better. Because it doesn't perceive that at all. There's a piece of our mind that's perfectly content eating out of a Dempsey dumpster and sleeping in a concrete culvert and living in an open field. Now people go, wait a minute, not me. But yes, there is a subconscious mind that is interested only in surviving. And it sees the present condition as that point of survival. It's rather interesting. I have a young friend, a young graduate from my past life who I remember at one point he had around $12 million in his estate, and he had something occur, I believe was the stroke of a legislative pen in Texas, and he lost $2 million. And oh my gosh, you thought he was going to die. Poor baby. You know what I mean? The rest of us
He only had 10 million left.
He only had 10 million left. What a, you know. But the thing of it is, you see, his mind had perceived that as his status quo, and that was just as difficult for him to go through as it would be for you or I to lose $100 or two or whatever that happens to be. Everything's relative, and that status quo is a very sensitive thing. Another thing too, you're flying in the face of a lot of previous admonitions. I mean, for example, one of the things I hear people being careful about in getting into some of these promotions or things that we've been talking about is, so I don't know anybody, I don't know enough people. Well, they're substantiating the fact that, first of all, they weren't supposed to talk to strangers, and so they really haven't been, and they feel that since they don't know a lot of people, they don't have a chance, and that's not true, because as you go about your life circumstantially, once you've seen it done and the subconscious mind recognizes that it's okay, and once you've practiced a little bit and gone through the little clumsiness and the pain of not being effective, after a while that's very simple. I don't think I go anywhere where I'm not asking for a business card, and if they don't have one, I provide one.
Really?
And I can pick them up all day long. People are just as nice if you just ask them. They don't think you're up to anything. And it's really fascinating.
So maybe what we're talking about here is expectations. We expect things to be a certain way. We expect ourselves, our friends, our associates to act in a certain manner. And when we change and act differently than what we're accustomed to or what we expect, we think there must be something wrong with that, instead of there being something right with that.
Well, there's no question that friends are going to go like this when you start moving forward with your life. They wonder what you're up to. I mean, because you're reminding them of what they might be able to do if they only tried. Or they're afraid that you might grow and leave them behind, or they just don't understand that, and so it causes some apprehension. But gee, you know, how are you going to make a contribution if you don't stride out? I mean, that's what that's about.
And that's what the purpose of the series is to help people to understand that it is possible for them to become more powerful in their lives.
Yeah, see, in the series that we do, the first 4 essays are designed primarily to re-prepare people. You see, in other words, I've heard it said that there is no such thing as a born salesperson. And I said, no, that's not true. We're all born salespeople. It's just that we have been untrained. As we've been deprogrammed from our spontaneity, our excitement, our enthusiasm, our curiosity. I remember every child that I reared and every grandchild. By the way, there was 6 and then there's 20. And
wow.
But you can...
Yes, isn't that wonderful?
We always kind of encourage them to move out, and it was really kind of fascinating. They just didn't know any strangers. They would move out and they would make contact, and oftentimes would be refuted, and we'd be confused by the refutation. I mean, they think, what's wrong with that person? But it gradually, ever so gradually, most people are prompted to, I do admit, I remember Marley, one of my granddaughters, who was very venturous. She'd go out there and she'd run into kids who had been conditioned not to talk to strangers and didn't know how to accommodate her overtures.
Yes,
and she'd come back and say, what's wrong with those people? And she's still real open, Yeah. But to tell someone not to talk to strangers is pretty self-defeating in a way.
Well, there's a little statement that I've always liked that said, strangers are only friends waiting to be introduced.
Waiting to be introduced?
Yes. Speaking of which, Bern, I think if we could just take a moment, and for any of our viewers who may have tuned in later in the program, this is Life Talk with Bern Moses. I'm Gina Fitt, and this is Bern. And as we're discussing how to be more powerful in our lives, what are some of the things that we can do, maybe the most basic places to start to confront fear, Bern? Because it seems like fear is such an overwhelming problem, especially when you're trying to learn how to do something that you're not comfortable with.
To start trying things. Just try. I know that there have been people that say, well, there's no such word. Try to pick up that pen. And you pick it up and they say, well, no, you didn't try, you did it. And so what you have to do is set aside try and then go for it. And, sometimes that doesn't work. You can't take the word out of the language. You know what I'm saying? It's okay to try. Now, let's examine that for a second. To those who say there's no such thing as try, imagine, if you would, that I had this huge, it's probably, we'll say, what is that, 4 feet? 4 feet square box here that's maybe 6 feet tall. And it's all covered with aluminum foil, and it's got these big bands around it, securing it and what have you.
Right.
And I say to someone, come and lift that box. Well, all you can do is come and try, because there's no experience that conveys to you that it can be done. Okay? So the first person in the room who walks over to it and kind of braces themselves and kind of gives it a heave and it comes up real easy, just because it's a hollow box, then no one else in the room essentially can try to lift the box. They either lift the box or they don't. Follow what I'm saying?
But they can.
But they can do it, sure. It's obvious. It's an empty box and anybody can do it, and so you can no longer try. But at the same time, if you had 10 people and excuse them from the room, each one would have to try. Follow what I'm saying? Because they had no previous experience.
In other words, try is a condition of not knowing.
Sure. And people getting into sales or business or whatever don't know who they are. I don't think I've ever recruited anyone in my life into the business and I really knew who I was getting. And it became pretty clear that they didn't know who they were bringing. We really don't sometimes, it's kind of like we don't know what our capacities are if they haven't been tested. And so a person needs to come and associate and fellowship and try. And in the trying, we evolve into a practice process. In other words, people have to be encouraged to practice. Remember the premises of practice? The first one is the permission that you have the permission to be clumsy, inept, and inadequate, and sometimes inappropriate. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to practice. And so you have to say, oh, it's okay for me to be clumsy. The next thing is a premise, and that is you've got to do things you don't know how to do yet. Say, it's okay to say, I can't do this.
Right.
But you have to tack on the word yet in order to make it a valid concept.
That totally changes the whole meaning of the sentence, doesn't it?
If you choose to, and if you practice and prepare yourself. It's just, like I said, another thing, a lot of people say there's no such word as can't. Well, of course there is. A lot of things I can't do. Doesn't mean that I couldn't do them. It's just that I've chosen not to do them, or they're outside the law. For example, I cannot fly without assistance.
Right.
And to not say that to say, well, there's no such word as can't is kind of silly. Parents do that to their kids a lot. Don't say can't. No such word as can't. You can. That's pretty frustrating for a young mind. But to be able to say, that's right, you can't do it yet, but you've got a special gift for tying shoelaces and hitting a ball and all the things that you want to do. You've got a special gift. And the child might say, well, what do you mean a special gift? Well, it's like any gift. In other words, if I handed you a present, I mean, you get excited. You know what I mean? You want to
Yes.
see what's in it, but it's encased in this package. It's a gift, it has value to you, and there's a reason to want it. And so what you have to do is you have to begin to untie the ribbon, or you rip and tear it, or whatever, but it takes some effort to get to the gift. And it's the same thing with the gifts that we were bequeathed with because of who we are. We're loaded with gifts, and until we exercise them, we don't realize how many there really are.
What we're really obviously doing a lot of times in our life is walking around our gifts, giving them wide berth, looking at them suspiciously with fear in our eyes instead of eagerly running forward,
Exactly.
ripping the lid off, untying the ribbon, pulling the tissue out and saying, what is this?
Yeah, and
What is this that I have?
And sometimes the ripping and the tearing is being done out of embarrassment.
Yes.
Because to carefully unwrap a gift while everybody's watching and laughing and smiling is very tedious. And so the little fear creeps in even at that level. Really kind of fascinating. But if we can look into ourselves and say, boy, I mean, can you imagine the capacities that every single person on the planet has, presuming they've been properly fed and what have you?
It's
Oh,
absolutely
incredible.
exciting. Bern, it looks like we're about to the end of our time. I'm hoping that we can discuss this a little more next week, the difference between a capacity and ability and how we can be more powerful in our lives.
Great. Well, I'll tell you, everyone's been watching Life Talk, where we talk about life, living, and making a living, and our phone number is 1-800-661-3490. If people will call, we'll send them a cassette tape of the show. And my name is Bern. And
Moses,
thank you, Gina.
thank you, Bern.